Good morning. Tiana Squenas Mitzi Dean. I go by she, her pronouns, and I spoke in the Lekwungen language to show my appreciation and respect for the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and also Chianu Nation at Beecher Bay. They have been stewards of this land for millennia, and we are honoured to be standing here today. I'd like to begin by sharing well wishes from my colleague Lisa Baer, Minister of Citizen Services. I know she wanted to be here today, but she's staying in her community because of the pandemic. I'd like to acknowledge the Ministry of Citizen Services for designing and delivering this very impressive project. This project is so important to many people in the West Shore. It's been a long time coming, and I'm thrilled to finally see it here. As a resident of Metchosin and formerly of Shirley, I know firsthand how challenging the commute to downtown Victoria can be. For people living in Souk, a regular commute can take around 2 hours, and that's without any issues with the weather or an accident. We heard loud and clear from people in the West Shore that they're tired of spending hours in their cars. They want to work closer to home and have more time with their families. Today, we're here to solve this problem. The new West Hills Share Space is the province's first mobile co-working office. It gives people the flexibility they need and want in these uncertain times. It will allow government employees to plug into a modern office close to home. For those who live in the West Shore and surrounding communities, I encourage you to learn more about ShareSpace. Thank you to all of our public service staff, and I am sure this is going to be an amazing place to work. It's my absolute honour now to introduce the Premier John Horgan.
Thanks, Mitzi. It's great to be in my home community of Langford, to follow through on a commitment that I made actually when I was first elected in 2005, to work with the provincial government to get more office space here in the West Shore. As many people will not know, over 20% of the Victoria-based professional public service lives in the West Shore in communities that Mitzi and I represent. And by putting shared space here in Langford, that allows countless public servants to do their work to make BC better, closer to their home, which means more time for their families, less impact on our infrastructure, and less impact on climate change. This has been a long time coming, as Mitzi said. I want to give a shout out to my friend and my mayor, Stu Young, for constantly beating the drum to diversify service delivery in the South Island to make sure that those of us who live in the West Shore can access services, can be full participants in our economy and our social and cultural life while staying as close to home as possible. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, a pandemic is an odd time to open up shared space when for the past year we've been telling people to stay apart. But the pandemic will not be with us forever, and we need to plan as a government, as do businesses, as do communities, as do individuals and families. We need to plan for the day when we can go back to what was used to be normal in any event, being with people, sharing our work, sharing our sports, sharing our cultural and social activities. It's just around the corner. I want people to continue to be vigilant, but also to have some hope that we will get through this together. ShareSpace provides that opportunity to have workers come to a place where they can collaborate, where they can work together for better outcomes without having to go through the long commute into Victoria. And as we build out this pilot, we want to see more initiatives like this right across the province so that people who work for the professional public service can continue to make their contribution to community, but doing it closer to their own home. I'm proud of the work we've been able to do here. I also want to give a shout out to Citizen Services staff who've spearheaded this initiative. It was less than 16 months ago that Mitzi and I were standing in a construction site. The budget here was about $3 million for a space that will be available to the people of British Columbia for the next 15 years. It is consistent with what the cost would have been to go into any location in any major city around British Columbia. So it's cost effective, it's good for the environment, it's good for people, and it's long overdue. Now, I also want to say that it's not just the public services, it's looking at new ways to work, new ways to collaborate. Over the past 12 months, I've talked to countless business leaders, countless employees about how they've adapted to the past 12 months, how they've adapted their work life and their businesses to meet the challenges of COVID-19. And many of us have been working from home, and many of us want to continue to work from home. For the professional public service and for industry, having share spaces like this allows us to put in secure internet access, secure technologies, so that we can avoid cyber terrorism and a whole host of other initiatives that come with our modern society. This is the way forward. This is the future. I'm very proud to be here today. I want to thank Mitzi for her patience as well, and all of the people who live in the West Shore who will be able to have their neighbors get to work faster, less impact on the community, and be able to be, again, strong contributors to a better British Columbia. So with that, Jen, I'll open up for questions about this exciting day and any other issues that might be on the mind of the media assembled.
Reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. We're going to start today with a question from Rob Shaw, Check News.
Well, hey, Premier. Just wanted to, I guess, ask you about this facility in Langford to start off. Are there other parts of Metro Victoria or the Capital Region or even sort of the South Island where you foresee government having similar offices in Nanaimo or Malahat or up in the peninsula to sort of, or is this it?
No, this is a pilot. This is to demonstrate to ministries across government that we can have a shared space. And it's not just for one ministry. This facility will be available to all government employees to come, to log on, to be in a secure place, to collaborate with their colleagues, and also to learn about what's going on in other ministries. This cross-pollination of activity, I think, will lead to better decision-making, better recommendations to government to improve the lives of British Columbians. And it's not just here in the West Shore, of course. It will be potentially out into the peninsula. Again, a significant commute for workers and an impact on our infrastructure. It will be obviously something we want to look at in Nanaimo. Again, Vancouver Island is the focus here, but not exclusively. Out the Fraser Valley, into the Okanagan, and up into the interior, this is an opportunity to bring people together in a safe, secure place so they can collaborate, they can focus on their work without having to go long distances in some cases in the north and in the interior, and significant distances when you think about commutes in Vancouver. So if this proves out, which we expect it will, already it's occupied, not many people here today. The pandemic, of course, has reduced capacity, but we've designed it with pandemic in mind. So we're trying to take the best that we've learned as a community from the past 12 months and implement it for the future. And I'm confident this will be happening in other communities across British Columbia.
Rob, do you have a follow-up?
Sure, thanks. Can I just switch topics to vaccines? Manitoba's Premier has a deal with the Calgary-based company to buy the province's own supply of vaccines. And your health minister has mentioned to us that he's meeting with that company too and is interested in what Manitoba is doing. And I just wondered, from your perspective, are you willing to follow Manitoba's lead in buying BC's own supply of vaccines, or is that on or off the table as far as you're concerned?
Well, certainly everything's on the table, Rob. Adrian Dix, the Minister of Health, will be meeting with Providence to talk about what they can offer us, not in the short term, but in the long term. And this has been a topic of conversation between premiers and with the federal government for the past number of weeks. As we've run into difficulty with vaccine distribution, that's led to concern in the community, which elevates up to government and into premiers' offices across the country. And Premier Pallister has taken the first step. I expect Premier Kenney will follow suit shortly. I don't want to speak for him or any of the other premiers, but this is a topic of conversation for the longer term. There's no vaccine approved for development in Canada or distribution in Canada, so we've got a long way to go before we're in a position to take on domestic supply. But it does speak to a challenge that's not just for this federal government or even the last federal government. There's been a diminishment of our ability to provide for ourselves for decades now. And I think the pandemic has brought into graphic highlight not just our need to be self-sufficient when it comes to things like personal protective equipment, medical supplies, vaccines, but a range of other initiatives as well. Agri-tech is now a very hot button item because we want to make sure that we can produce enough food to meet our needs in the event that borders close in the future. So I think the pandemic has opened our eyes to the importance of domestic supply chains, and of course the vaccines are top of mind today. But I want to reassure people that the federal government has made commitments to 6 million vaccinations being available by the end of this quarter, which is the end of next month. And we're holding them to that, and I expect that will happen. Now, the challenge, of course, is that if we're advised that we're going to receive vaccines on a Wednesday, and we start booking appointments for elderly, in this case in their 80s, for Thursday, and the supply doesn't show up, that disrupts our vaccination plan, and we're concerned about that. Not overly concerned at this point, but if this continues for a few more weeks, then we'll be in a critical situation, and we'll have more to say at that time should that occur. Today, there is no vaccine to buy in Canada. If it becomes available, we will be at the front of the line with others trying to get as much as we can to meet the needs of British Columbians.
Next question is from Mike Hagar, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Premier. Switching gears to the stats coming out of Vancouver, showing a huge increase in hate crimes against East Asian people in the city. We tweeted about it yesterday. Can you just detail what the province is doing beyond, the anti-racism legislation?
You broke up for quite a bit of that question, but if I'm clear, you asked me about the increase in hate crimes, particularly towards Chinese Canadians, Asian Canadians in the Lower Mainland across BC, and what steps are we taking to address that? Is that correct, Mike? Does that capture what you said?
Yeah, sorry. Can you just explain what you are doing at the provincial level to help police investigate this crime and in terms of reaching out to the community?
Great, thank you. Well, let's start with reaching out to the community first. Of course, this is the celebration of Lunar New Year has been happening over the past number of days. Normally in British Columbia, Lunar New Year celebrations involve hundreds of thousands of people, parades in our major urban centers, celebrations throughout our communities. None of that happened this year. But we did have a new way to connect and a new way to celebrate through our computers. And I conducted several virtual Lunar New Year celebrations with representatives and people from the Chinese community right across British Columbia. In addition to that, of course, we have a COVID recovery task force that includes members from the nonprofit community, particularly Queenie Chu from Success, an outstanding nonprofit in the Lower Mainland that deals with immigrant services. Queenie raised these concerns 12 months ago, and they have continued to persist. We've seen graphic images recently in the United States. In fact, a murder taking place on our television screens, an 80-plus-year-old Asian man assaulted by a youth for no reason other than the color of his skin. That's absolutely unacceptable, and it's not just in the United States. The release of the information that you touch upon brings home for all of us in British Columbia that we as individuals and as a community have more work to do to fight racism. We will be bringing forward anti-racism legislation this year. Rashna Singh has been appointed the Parliamentary Secretary to work with the Attorney General on those issues. In addition to that, Mike Farnworth, the Solicitor General, has been reaching out to law enforcement across British Columbia to reinforce the importance of prosecuting hate crimes. We need to make sure that violence against people of color is not just treated as violence, but in fact hate crimes, which carry much stiffer penalties, more difficulty in prosecutions, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't follow through and make sure that people understand in British Columbia, if you're going to turn against people because of the color of your skin, you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's the message Minister Farnworth is delivering, and I expect law enforcement to follow up on that.
Do you have a follow-up, Mike?
Yes. So in terms of prosecution, do you have special hate crimes prosecutors that liaise with the police who can't charge in this province to crack down and ensure that, these offenses actually get sentences that reflect the severity of these crimes?
I can't give you an accurate answer to that question. Mike, it's hypothetical in one sense, but absolutely practical in another. I would suggest you direct that question to the Attorney General, and the Solicitor General will be happy to answer that question.
Our next question today is from Lisa Yuzda, News 1130.
Hi, Premier. Going back to, I can't remember who was asking about vaccines. You know, there are so many people that are waiting for this, and we hear you talk about challenges, concerns about will the vaccines show up when promised. People are chomping at the bit to get their parents vaccinated. I certainly am. Can you talk about how you're going to angle this? You know, I'm getting a lot of emails, and I know a lot of people are, and I'm sure your staff are, about when people are going to hear about when they're going to get these appointments.
Well, first of all, I think we need to put some context in how we got here to the middle of February. 12 months ago, we implemented a pandemic response plan, and at that time, I was advised that it was unlikely that we would see vaccinations in place for 18 months. So we should celebrate the fact that vaccines have been developed at the pace that they have. But we also, of course, now have a challenge about the distribution of those vaccines. The federal government will be procuring a sufficient number of vaccinations for all Canadians. We agreed as provinces and the federal government that that was the best way forward. Having 13 different jurisdictions, when you count the territories and the federal government, all trying to outbid each other for access to supply is inefficient, it's counterproductive, and as a nation, it's appropriate that the federal government oversee the procurement of vaccines. However, if we are not able to meet the expectations of the public, that doesn't go back to Ottawa, it comes back to the provincial government. And I fully accept that responsibility. We were advised that we would have X number of vaccinations in place by the end of the first quarter of 2021. The good news is we received early supplies in December that we weren't expecting. We were able to vaccinate a lot of people, a lot of residents of long-term care facilities and staff. And that was the first step, and we've seen as a result, and you know, you listen to Dr. Henry and Minister Dix in their presentations every week, we've seen a radical decline in outbreaks in long-term care facilities. So the most vulnerable people in the province are protected, and now we need to take steps to protect those who are not in the long-term care environment, starting with the most aged and working our way down. But we can't do that without supply. And me being concerned about that and complaining about Ottawa will not vaccinate one British Columbian. Working and collaborating with Ottawa and my partners at the provincial tables will. And I'm going to do that as recently or as urgently as this afternoon when we have yet another Council of the Federation meeting followed by a meeting with the Prime Minister and his staff. So we'll be talking about these issues in the next number of hours. And I want British Columbians to be confident that as vaccines become available, we have a plan in place just down the street from where we're assembling here today. The Eagle Ridge dry floor has been made available by the City of Langford to Island Health as a vaccination location here in Langford, and we are reaching out through our health authorities to communities across British Columbia to put in place the infrastructure to meet the expectations of the public, and I'm confident, should supply arrive, that we'll be able to meet those expectations.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, are you concerned that the lack of information right now is increasing anxiety? I know we talked to my mom's oncologist yesterday, and he's like, yes, you should get the vaccine. I was like, do you know anything about it? He's like, the information has not been great, and I'm hearing this from other people who are asking health authorities about their parents. Like, is there just a vacuum of information right now that is increasing anxiety? And why can't people know a bit more, even if we don't know the exact date?
Well, because we don't know the exact date, and that's the challenge. I mean, I want to be as open about this as possible. We've been talking about these issues for a year. We've been talking about our vaccination plan for weeks now. We brought in Dr. Penny Ballum to oversee that on behalf of British Columbians, former Deputy Minister of Health, former Chief Administrative Officer in the City of Vancouver, and now the Chair of Coastal Health, or Vancouver Coastal Health in the Lower Mainland. So we've got good people in place. We're ready to go. We don't have vaccines. It's not about transparency, Lisa. I'm telling you what I know. When we get information, we're making it available to the public. There was a disruption in the Pfizer distribution. There is now a disruption in the Moderna distribution. We have other vaccines that are being approved as we speak by the federal government. When we have more in place, like AstraZeneca, like Johnson & Johnson's Janssen product, which is a one-shot deal, we'll be getting those into the community. I understand and appreciate anxiety and frustration, but it's not from lack of giving information. It's about a lack of information. If we had it, we would tell you.
Our next question is from Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my question. Just in regards to following up on the anti-racism legislation, what specifically are you looking for? Because again, this is an issue in many of the mandate letters. What would be in that legislation specifically that would change the lives for people of color, who are experiencing systemic racism and direct racism? Like, what would you like to see in the legislation that would have an impact, and how soon will we see that?
Well, the Rashta Singh, the Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism, is working with stakeholders, working with Legislative Council drafters to prepare the legislation. I don't want to preempt that. There's a lot of work being done and a lot of work to do to get it into a final form, and I don't want to prejudge the work that Rashta is doing. It has not yet come back to Cabinet for final decision. But what I will say to communities, people of color, and other groups that feel threatened and intimidated by hate crimes and violence in British Columbia that has been made worse, I believe, by the pandemic and the frustrations that people are feeling. We're there. We're hearing your message. We're hearing the call, and we're going to take action. What inspires me is discussions I had with the Chinese community through Lunar New Year celebrations this past week about their frustration and anxiety about an increase in violence and hate speak, as well as actual actions against individuals, but a sense of comfort that more and more people are stepping up to defend people who they find themselves being attacked verbally in public places. So I think community is responding in a very positive way. And I'm always a glass half full guy, but I am confident that the vast majority of British Columbians are appalled when they see their fellow citizens behaving ignorantly, inappropriately, and violently against fellow citizens of a different color. And it's just not acceptable. We repeat that regularly. We need all people in the community to talk this way, not just in debates during election campaigns, but all the time, in workplaces, at kitchen tables, at the arena. When we can gather together, we need to talk about the society we want. An inclusive society that does not tolerate hate speak. And that involves all of us, not just politicians, not just legislation. It involves how we behave with our fellow citizens. And I'm confident British Columbians are up to that task.
Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes. On the issue of collecting race and ethnicity data, the Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe has said she could start collecting that next week if she was given sort of a standardized form from the government. And Bonnie Henry's also been asked, why can't the health ministry collect more than just Indigenous data, which it does collect now, but for other racialized British Columbians? So what is the challenge? Like, why can't race and ethnicity data be collected immediately if it's a matter of a standardized form of different ethnicities that would be asked by various sectors? Why can't that be done right now?
Well, we are working on that, and these issues have been drawn to our attention as a result of the pandemic. There have been calls over time for more access to race-based data, but there are also historically been those who resist the collection of race-based data, seeing that as in itself racism. So there are a whole host of views in the community about how we manage this. We've reached out to the Information and Privacy Commissioner. We've reached out to the Human Rights Commissioner, which we reestablished after 16 years with being a province without a Human Rights Commissioner, so we can make sure that we get this right. It's not as simple as one would expect to just say we're going to start collecting data on people's private information that they may not wish to share for reasons that are known only to them. So we need to make sure that this is done in a way that's understanding of some sensitivities over time. Historically, this is information that may well not have been advantageous to individuals to be shared with government and with others in society. So it's not as cut and dried as you and I would expect it to be based on the way you phrased the question. And I'm not criticizing that. I absolutely hear what you're saying, and I've been hearing it increasingly over the past number of weeks, and that's why we've been taking these actions to bring together those who are tasked with protecting human rights, tasked with protecting privacy, to give us guidance and advice on how we can work to collect this information and make it available in appropriate situations so that we can better address racism and other challenges that are race-based in our society.
Next question is from Binder Sajan, CTV.
Hi, Premier. So the budget would have been delivered typically around now, the spring budget. Of course, it's been delayed. And I know you've said that the focus in April will be on recovery. So I'm wondering if you see the Small Business Recovery Grant Program, which seems to be struggling in getting money out the door, if you see that being extended or perhaps revamped for April.
Well, we won't extend this bundle of money because, as you know, the province allocates resources on a year-by-year basis. But we will absolutely be having more elements of recovery in the budget that will be tabled in April. This program that is currently existing will expire because we appropriated the money through the legislature to expire at the end of this fiscal year. And I know that that sounds odd to families, but that's how we budget in British Columbia, and it's been tested and true over many, many decades. The challenge, of course, is to make sure we distribute those resources where they're needed. Minister Ravi Kahlon has been reaching out. I think he talked to me last night. He said he's spoken to 7 chambers of commerce yesterday, with 2 more that he planned on engaging with last night. We're working with accountants, asking accountants to contact the companies that they work for and advising them that they have access to these resources. The challenge is not criteria. The challenge is we're not having enough people asking for the money. But there are others who are not in that, larger businesses, medium and large businesses, who are struggling, and we don't have a specific program for them. So we're looking at retooling the dollars that have been approved by the legislature and budgeted by the government for recovery to businesses, and we're looking at how we can get those dollars out the door by the 31st of March. And I'm confident we'll be able to do that. It may not be in the same form as we've got it in today, but we need to spend the money by March 31st, or it goes back into servicing the public debt, which is not a bad thing, but we want to make sure we get money into people's hands. I would also add, while I'm on the subject, we've almost had $1 billion in COVID relief to individuals, almost 2 million British Columbians. The numbers are just below both of those, but 2 million is easier to say, and 1 billion is easier to say rather than 994,000. I'm not sure exactly what the number is today, but a lot of money's gone out through the COVID benefit, and I'm confident that the Small Business and Medium-Sized Business Grant Program will be fully subscribed, either through the existing criteria or new criteria that we put in place in the last weeks of March.
Do you have a follow-up, Binder?
I do, and I just want to ask you again, just with regards to racism. I heard you say there that most British Columbians would be appalled. For those who are experiencing these hate incidents, hearing you say that you're talking about, prosecutions and, filing charges and all of that, I guess the question might be, what about prevention? And I know it's not, a quick fix, but what are your thoughts in terms of actually preventing some of these incidents from happening, and what can the province do there?
Well, anything to deal with prevention usually starts with education. And so we are working, the Minister of Education is working with school boards, the BC Teachers Federation, and other stakeholders in the K-12 system to see ways that we can introduce anti-racism discussions and dialogues with young people. Again, we need to make sure that we're talking about these issues all the time. Prevention starts by people stepping up when they see intolerance, and I call on all British Columbians to do that, and you know what? The vast majority will. It's that small group of people that are driven by hate and misunderstanding that lead to violence, whether it be physical or verbal, against people of color or other people in our community. And prevention starts with each of us. Being accountable to the people around us. And this is important for people to get their head around. It's not just government's responsibility to tell people how to behave. I think our parents started to teach us how to behave, and our challenge now is to take what we've learned over the course of our lifetime about being kind and compassionate and focused on lifting people up. We need to do that every day in our daily lives, and most people want to do that. And I think that the pandemic has also highlighted graphically that although there is pockets of hate and racism in British Columbia, there is an overwhelming desire to do something about it. And that's not just government action, that's personal action.
Next question is from Richard Zisman, Global.
Premier, Dr. Henry said a few weeks ago that the vaccination plan for the 80-plus group would be rolled out this week. We now understand we won't hear about it until next week. Is it in doubt that that plan will start the first week of March? Like, can you tell British Columbians if that process is being delayed?
Well, as I said to an earlier question, I'll be meeting with my provincial colleagues and the Prime Minister later today, getting a direct update at that level. Dr. Henry works with Dr. Tam and others who are overseeing the procurement of vaccines, so she's in a better position to answer that question. I think she'll be available tomorrow. Richard, I don't want to punt that ball down the road, but I'll have more information later this afternoon, and Dr. Henry will have that information as well. Better to ask that question tomorrow, I think.
Do you have a follow-up, Richard?
There's another push on to have the Commonwealth Games on Vancouver Island and in Vancouver for 2026. David Black is leading the charge on that. Would you be supportive of the province putting in money to support a Commonwealth Games bid?
Well, we're looking at a number of initiatives to kickstart welcoming the world back to British Columbia as we come out of the pandemic. And one of those is the Commonwealth Games. Mr. Black has been championing that issue for some time. Others need to get involved as well. We need to see a firm business plan from the private sector, though. The province will not be overseeing this. We want to know what the community is prepared to do. Those details are not yet available. I know Mr. Black is working on that, and I look forward to detailed information from him and his team as he assembles it in the weeks ahead. I'd also highlight the Invictus Games, which we were very close to landing for 2020. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, and it was slated to go to The Hague in the Netherlands, and of course was canceled because of COVID. But the Invictus Games is something Victoria and environs would be ideally suited to host because of CFB Esquimalt as well as CFB Comox up the island. There's a strong military family presence here in the South Island, and the Invictus Games speaks about participation and courage and overcoming extraordinary obstacles. Those are just the types of things I think British Columbians have been focusing on over the past 12 months. So we want to zero in on the Invictus Games as a possibility for British Columbia as well as the Commonwealth Games. And there are those who are seeing an opportunity to talk about revisiting the Winter Olympics to take advantage of the infrastructure and the facilities that were built for 2010. Those are, again, discussions happening from volunteers and the private sector, and the province stands ready. Minister Melanie Mark stands ready to entertain any discussions communities have about increasing participation, more sport, inviting the world to come back to British Columbia when it's safe to do so.
Next question is from Don Gibson, Goldstream News.
Hi, Premier. Can you hear me? Hi. So going back to the new share space in Langford, I'm wondering what sectors of public service employees are going to be working out of this office space?
We have 22 ministries, 24 ministers, and all of the public service that lives in and around Victoria will be able to access this space. It's by appointment, as it were. You can't have everybody showing up at once, but it will be a real game changer for people who live in and around our area, Goldstream, Langford. This is something that Mayor Stu Young and I and Member Dean have been talking about for a long, long time, and to see it realized is a very special day for us, and it will change the lives of one of the fastest growing parts of British Columbia. The West Shore is growing in leaps and bounds just behind us. The West Hills development is some 6,000 doors. That's a lot of people, mostly families. New YMCA across the street. Trying to keep people in place is good for the economy, it's good for the environment, and quite frankly, it's good for society so that we can interact and work and live and play in the same place. That's been a focus for Langford, it's been a focus for the West Shore, and I'm very pleased that we were able to achieve this today. And it will be any member of the BC Public Service can access this space, work from here, collaborate with colleagues in their own ministries or in other ministries. We just did a tour, a virtual tour. I think that might show up on on someone's computer later on. It's an outstanding space, cost-effective, and we're excited about it.
Dawn, do you have a follow-up?
I guess I'm hoping you can maybe elaborate a little bit on what the future looks like in terms of how these co-working spaces are utilized and maybe how it will affect residents on the West Shore.
Well, what it will do, first and foremost, it will be a secure place to work from. So any challenges of, logging on at home over the past number of months using your home internet connection, which may not be as secure as the servers that government provides in offices, not just in Victoria, but across British Columbia. So those secured servers will be able to be accessed from this location. There are collective workspaces or collaborative workspaces. There are individual workspaces and facilities to make sure that you can continue to be as productive as possible, meeting the needs of your employer, the people of British Columbia. So that the future is, quite frankly, less time traveling, more time focused on your work, and more time to get back home to be with your family, to enjoy the amenities of the community, the parks, the trails, the sporting facilities, the arts and culture amenities. I mean, this allows people to spend less time driving, quite frankly, whether they be taking public transit or in single occupancy vehicles. That will reduce our GHG impact, and I believe, quite frankly, it's the way of the future. As I say, I've spoken with countless businesses and workers over the past 12 months and how they found that they're going to be reshaping how they do business when the pandemic lifts, because they found new and innovative ways to meet the needs of their customers. And that's what government's doing by having this shared space today.
Next question is from Scott Cunningham, CTV2.
Premier, thanks for taking my question. I'm going to shift a little bit up island to the Cowichan Tribes area, where sadly 2 individuals have passed away from COVID-19 this week. I spoke to the health authority there, the head of it, this morning, and he said that while he's mostly happy with what the province has done for them this pandemic, he said not enough is being done right now. Vaccine is moving too slow, and in the future, he expects this to get worse and says he needs more help. I want you to react to that and tell me what you can do.
Well, certainly I understand the frustration that not just the Cowichan Tribes, but people across British Columbia are feeling. We were given advice that vaccines would be on the way, and they haven't arrived. And so I can understand how despondent people are. We're all looking for some hope during these challenging times, and the prospect of rolling out vaccinations to as many British Columbians who want them, 4 or 5 million British Columbians, is a daunting task. But we have been working with the Cowichan Tribes. The vaccination process there is well underway. Similarly, in Nanaimo, where we had outbreaks some weeks ago, we've been able to strategically use the vaccinations that we do have to suppress outbreaks, but also to give people hope that help is on the way. With respect to the leadership of the Cowichan Tribes, I have a long-standing relationship there. I used to represent the area when I was first elected. My constituency was broader then than it is today because of the growth. And so I understand, and I will certainly be reaching out to talk to the leadership. If there's any more we can do, we will. But I know Dr. Henry and public health officials are doing everything they can to meet the challenges, not just in Cowichan and on the island, but in the interior and in the north, where we've seen unacceptable increases in cases, particularly in Indigenous communities. In addition to that, of course, in our urban centres, we've seen a steady flattening of the curve in Fraser Health, but Dr. Henry advised me earlier this week that we have seen increases in Fraser Health. That's disconcerting. We thought we had that under control, so she'll have more to say on that tomorrow, and I would direct you to her with respect to any other initiatives that we will undertake in Cowichan.
A follow-up? Scott.
Yes, I do, and it's a big shift here. There is some news about a doctor out of the U.S. who's getting some errant tweets that are supposed to be going to you. His name's Dr. John Horgan. I'm wondering, he's put some kind of comical posts on Twitter telling people that you are not the same person. You're not the Horgan. He's not the Horgan you seek. Have you reached out to this professor from Georgia State? And I guess I just want you to kind of react to the story.
Well, I have. Thanks for the question. I did reach out to John Horgan to apologize. I sent him a handwritten note as well as a tweet encouraging him to come here. I thought that his Jedi mind trick, I'm not the John Horgan you're looking for, took me back to my Star Wars days. But it is, there's a lot of John Horgans in the world. I've learned that over the past number of years. Irish people, of course, we come from County Cork in the south of Ireland, and this particular John Horgan, who teaches at Georgia Tech or Georgia State University in Atlanta, comes from County Cork University. So we are kindred spirits. We may well be related. I have a cousin in Vancouver who does the genealogy. I'm going to send her this gentleman's details, and she'll track it down. We may have more to say on that in the future, but it was nice to have a bit of a laugh. It's been obviously a challenging time for all of us, and I was pleased to have the opportunity to have a smile and a joke with another John Horgan.
We have time for one more question today. It's going to come from Karen Larson, CBC.
Oh, hi, Premier. Thanks very much. I just have a couple of nuts and bolts questions here about today's announcement. And so with 20% of the workforce, you mentioned that's over 400 workers. Does this mean there's going to be a lot of underused office space in Victoria? Like, it seems like a bit of a duplication of facilities opening this office space in Langford.
No, government is always renewing leases with office space, not just in Victoria, but across British Columbia. And so as leases come up and space is not necessarily required in other parts of communities, then these shared space initiatives will replace those workplaces. But it's not designed or anticipated, quite frankly, that there will be a significant diminishment of government's procuring of space in urban centres. It's just that we'll be distributing that work around. People will still be attached to offices in ministries, but this allows them to connect with those ministries without having to drive into town, whether it's into Vancouver, into Surrey, or into Victoria. In the case of the West Shore, 20% of the workers that normally go to Victoria live in Souk, in Metchosin, in Colwood, in Langford. And those constituents of Mitzi's and mine have been saying to us for a long, long time, wouldn't it be nice, with all of the development that's happening here, that we could build some government office spaces here to save us the commute, to save us the impact on the environment. So that was the objective. This is a pilot. Mayor Young would prefer that we're building office space for full ministries, and he'll keep pushing me on that, I'm sure. But this is a good first step.
Karen, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just quickly. So you mentioned the potential for more satellite offices. Do you plan to open a next one, and where and when would that be?
Citizen Services is working on the time frame for that and the locations. Obviously, in fast-growing areas like the West Shore, where you've seen, we know through T4 data or employment data where people live. The same can be said in Abbotsford, for example, where you'll have, and Chilliwack, two locations that are distant into the Fraser Valley, but because of house prices in the Lower Mainland, more and more people are moving further and further away from where major employers are, not just the public sector, but the private sector as well. So when we look at a strategy for transportation in the Fraser Valley, for example, we don't just have to build SkyTrain and provide more buses and expand Highway 1. We also need to expand access to spaces where people can work and connect. That, again, is what COVID has shown to us, is there are oftentimes better ways for us to interact and engage to get positive, productive outcomes. And Share Space can do that, not just here in the West Shore, but across BC.
Thanks, everyone. That's all the time we have.
One last thing. Today, 37 years ago, Ellie and I got married. It's our 37th anniversary. That's 444 months, because we celebrate every month. Happy anniversary, dear.